The addition of targeted ads to Gmail in 2004 proved to be no joke, adding to Google's ever-burgeoning bottom line. Google had transformed itself into an advertising money-making machine.
Now, when we talk about publicity, the Google IPO has received more publicity than any other IPO in history.
When Google was preparing for its initial public offering of stock, it had to disclose a closely guarded secret, that it had staggeringly large revenues and profits. It took most investment observers by surprise and made Google a very attractive stock to own. And so, August 19th, 2004, the first day of trading of Google shares, saw the creation of hundreds of freshly minted millionaires. Those early investors and first Google employees had struck the mother lode.
For people who get into a company because of the money, an IPO is a big deal. Any exit strategy, you're bought by someone else, you have a public offering, whatever, it's a big deal. And it causes you to rethink your life because your dream has been achieved.
I'm doing okay. I'm comfortable. Most people would consider me wealthy. I consider myself wealthy.
Larry and Sergey were now way beyond wealthy. It took just 6 years for them to become billionaires. Their company, Google, had become one of the world's top search engines. It's even made it into dictionaries as a verb. Google as a technological tool has become part of pop culture. And young people's perception of Google as a cross between a college dorm and geek heaven means that Google receives more than 1 million job applications a year.
You come to Google, and first time I'm really feeling like everyone knows what they're doing and they know it better than me.
So just what does it take to be one of the chosen few selected to be a Googler? The Googleplex, as it is known by the Googlers who inhabit it, are made to feel that they are the best and brightest, deserving of the complimentary meals, the subsidized masseuse service, the free laundry, as well as the barbershop on wheels.
I feel one of the greatest thing about Larry and Sergey, they were really, really smart people and they were brilliant, but I think one of the best things that they've done is they also made sure that they surrounded themselves with the best and most brilliant people that they could find.
Google receives more than 1 million job applications a year. However, to join the ranks of some 20,000 worldwide Googlers requires passage through a grueling series of tests and interviews. Rajin Seth, another Stanford computer science graduate, had worked at a number of high-tech companies before approaching Google.
I probably went through somewhere between 10 to 15 interviews at the time. And then finally, my last interview was with Larry. And so, you know, literally I just came in one day and actually got to sit down in Larry Page's office and interview with him. And he asked me a bunch of tough questions, and I didn't quite know how I did, but apparently he liked me enough to the point where they decided to give me an offer.
Among the most highly prized employees at Google, just after computer science engineers, are new hires called APMs, or Associate Product Managers.
A large part of why Google hired associates, like my position, associate product managers, out of school at that point, was to be able to culture these future product managers like myself in the way Google wanted them to behave.
Mostly young, recent graduates with incredibly high test scores, they are given enormous amounts of responsibility and authority early in their career.
And we're not prioritizing that very hard right now because we don't think it's going to be able to replace the personal start page from day one.
Among the most recent crop of APMs is a Canadian, Jeff Harris.
The job that I'm actually doing, which is an associate product manager, is kind of designed for people that have a technical background but aren't necessarily interested in coding day to day. So what my job ends up being is communicating with the engineers who do code all the time and kind of just making sure that all the engineers are working together towards the same goal. So I'm just turned 22.
I think the biggest surprise at working at Google is probably how open it is about everything that we're doing. So I can just look it up on our internal site and see details on every single project that's out there, which is great from an organizational perspective.
Although Google might be highly transparent internally, it, like so many of the other big Silicon Valley high-tech companies, is extremely sensitive about what outsiders are allowed to report on, whether that be code on monitor screens or the doodles on the whiteboards, which are seemingly everywhere.
We believe in having whiteboards all over the place, and the reason for that is to really spur creativity, so that you can draw things and communicate ideas and work with other people on that idea.
The secure data connector here, right?
Is our ability to publish programmatically going to be released at the same time, or is that?
Yeah. And so a lot of times people will pull out their phone and take a picture of the whiteboard and send that around as an email. Those end up being part of the notes for the meeting.
Besides having whiteboards and food stands everywhere, the other striking feature about Google offices is the absence of paper.
We operate very much in a paperless manner. One of the things that we've done here at Google is that users have laptops that they carry with them to the meetings that they're in. A lot of the note-taking is done electronically so that it can be instantly shared with people.
An insatiable appetite for the new and innovative, spanning a wide spectrum of technologies, means Google is constantly on the prowl.
But not everything, of course, is invented at Google. We also have teams looking for great technology in small companies that we can pick up, that we can buy, where they would benefit from the structure of Google.
With plenty of cash and stock at its disposal, Google is able to scoop up companies it's interested in. That's how YouTube became a Google product, as did Google Earth and Picasa, as well as a web-based word processing program called Writely.
Writely was a word processor in the browser. You just go to it as a normal website and it just works. Google noticed it because we were, getting a little bit of press.
Google bought Writely and hired its founders to help develop it further.
My experience has been a little bit like I was a kid folding up little paper boats in a stream somewhere, and it was really fun. And, Daddy Warbucks wandered by and said, "Kid, this is great. Here's a pile of quarter-inch thick plate steel and an army of arc welders. Go build me a battalion of battleships."
Writely has morphed into Google Docs, a word processor that moves the application and its data from the personal desktop computer to Google's servers.
It's a little bit strange. It is strange. I'm definitely, I'm a 42-year-old graybeard now, right? Like, it's kind of, I'm not that old, but here, that's 90th percentile or something. I don't know what it is, but yeah, there's a lot of young engineers here. That it doesn't bother me. I think it's interesting to me. I think everybody gets to this point in their career where things begin to seem obvious. I don't mind the technical culture here. I'm not intimidated by it. I'm very productive, fierce, kind of meat-eating coder when I'm writing code, and they're all afraid of me, so they don't bother me. I wasn't here when they founded it, but my understanding of the founding conception of the culture is they wanted to do things and see things from an engineer's perspective.
We do have a lot of P1.
From that perspective, efficiency might very well be an engineer's prime directive.
Triage on them. Right now I'm looking at the one where you open a text document in Gmail and it gives an error.
Most of the teams do this every morning. There's a stand-up meeting. It's meant to be very short. It's about 10 minutes long. You're not supposed to speak for more than about a minute.
All right, so I continue unit testing.
The pencil is the conch shell from the Lord of the Flies. Remember that? So that's whoever has the pencil is talking. That's why it's a very efficient meeting. It took 5 minutes to tell the whole team what was going on.
Another meeting where members of the Google Docs team get to discuss problems is during their weekly Writely walk.
I think it's interesting to try to do big things that change the world. I think that's what I like about being at Google. We want to change the world too. We want to do great things. What's wrong with the logarithmic pruning that we do now?
The guy was editing for 8 hours and the beginning and the end got pruned.
So that's why we're using it. Okay. No, that's cool. That's cool. You get to deal with tens of millions of users and, big data centers and big machines and big engineering, and it's really fun.
For computer geeks, the fun really began in 1977 in a Silicon Valley garage when 2 college dropouts started a company called Apple and launched a revolution. The personal computer revolution. The power of the desktop computer unleashed across millions of homes and offices around the world changed everything. But now, after more than a quarter of a century of insinuating itself into our lives, the PC has lost pretty well all of its original gee-whiz luster. Google has set its sights on creating another revolution, by eliminating the need for desktop computers. It wants to put as much of that data as possible onto its own servers.
One of the things I think that's underappreciated is from the very earliest days, including at Stanford, they were great at minimizing the cost for putting together computer systems, and they've carried on that ability to deliver a huge amount of computing power at a relatively low cost.
From its beginnings, Google had made it a priority to manufacture as cheaply as possible all its servers and storage facilities to handle its fast search and logging of the internet. And as the internet has grown, so has the need for increased computing capacity.
Well, Google builds large data centers. We use personal computer components, and then we build a lot of specialized systems now to deal with the kind of scale that is required.
Scale is at the heart of Google. Not only does Google have access to almost limitless computer power, but perhaps of greater value, it has accumulated a massive collection of data. Data that can be used for testing at a scale unseen by most new computer engineers.
My office mate and I were just banting around some ideas, and we're talking about something that later turned into something close to Google Bookmarks. And, you know, we did a little bit of math and said, that'll be about, I don't know, 4 petabytes of data. That doesn't seem so bad. And that sentence, 4 petabytes of data, that doesn't seem so bad, is something that before I had been at Google for a month, I would have been shocked to hear those words coming out of my mouth.
That shocking 4 petabytes is the equivalent of 4 million gigabytes, numbers so staggeringly large that it is nearly impossible for mere mortals to fathom. As memory increases in capacity and decreases in price, Google is moving into something called cloud computing.
The whole idea behind cloud computing is to go ahead and get everything on their server where the professionals are managing it. The problem today is you've got all your stuff on your computer, you drop it, you break it, you delete it, it's a disaster. Why don't you put everything that's important somewhere else, keep it secure, keep it under your control, it's available to you on every demand, on every device, and everywhere you are.
The move to the cloud is ushering in a revolution in how we communicate, how we work, how we play, in fact, how we live.
People wonder, what's going to happen to information that is mine personally? It's my bank records, my health records, whatever it is, but I don't control it. It's sitting out there somewhere I have to just trust whoever has it to not do things with it I wouldn't want.
Is this move into the clouds opening a back door for governments and corporations to secretly access data about us? If everyone's digital data is moving into computer clouds, just where are these clouds? One of them has touched down in the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains in North Carolina. This was once the heartland of American furniture manufacturing. Then in the 1990s, cheap labor from overseas siphoned off the jobs, leaving behind a devastated economy and an awful lot of excess electricity. It just so happens that computer data centers are voracious users of electricity to run the servers and to cool vast quantities of water used for refrigeration. The town of Lenoir had plenty of both, and so in late 2005, Google came calling, but it came cloaked in secrecy.
From Google's perspective, at least as I understood it, it was that the race to build these data centers is so intense, and the information, at least they see it, is so proprietary that they didn't want any of their competitors to get wind of what they were doing.
T.J. Rohr is a lawyer and a member of the Lenoir City Council who was involved in the closed-door negotiations with Google.
They would reveal information to us that we couldn't reveal to anyone else. Google definitely had an attitude like, look, it's our way or the highway. This is the term these are the terms we're offering. Take them or leave them.
Desperate local and state officials were more than ready to reach a deal that would bring Google to this devastated county. They offered Google a 30-year tax break on property and equipment.